Hello, everybody. It's good to be back together again here at this time as we look at God's Word, as we're looking at the I am sayings of Jesus. I'm Pastor Jon, the Associate Pastor here at the McAllen First United Methodist Church. If this is your first time with us, thank you for joining us. If you've been following along in these Bible studies, we're going to continue moving forward looking at those I am statements of Jesus. If you're joining us via Facebook or YouTube, either now or after the Bible study is over, take a moment, say hello to us in the comments below so that we can respond to you. We're always glad to know folks are participating in the Bible study, and we want to connect with you however we can. But the best thing of all is tonight or today we get to connect with God's Word, and that is the thing that God uses to shape us and to mold us. He gives us His Spirit, God gives us His Word, God gives us the church. And so as we come to the Word together, we become shaped by the Word. One of the things that we're called to do is to place our faith, our trust in Jesus. And the way that we can entrust ourselves to Jesus is if we know who He is. When we know who Jesus is, we are more readily and likely to give our lives to Him in some way or another. And so as we are studying the Gospel of John, looking at those I am statements, we're learning exactly who Jesus is, because Jesus says, I am. That I am comes out of the Old Testament. Remember, as Moses was about to lead the people out of Egypt, and he was in that first conversation with God at the burning bush, Moses asked God, who am I going to tell the people has sent me? Who will I tell them you are? And God's response is, you will say, I am has sent you. And so God is the great I am, the one who exists, the one who is, who was, and forever will be. And when Jesus comes along, Jesus, of course, is the Son of God. As John points out at the beginning of his gospel, Jesus is the visible, touchable, knowable representation of the invisible, seemingly unknowable God. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And then the Word became flesh and dwelled among us. And so Jesus is very really, very truly, I am in the flesh. And so we've learned already that Jesus has said to us already in our study back in John chapter 6, where Jesus says, I am the bread of life. That's sustenance, and not just any kind of life as well. It's that Greek word zoe. It's that fullness, that vitality, that abundance of life. Then Jesus comes along and says, I am the light of the world. I'm the one that's going to help you see how to take the step forward. I'm going to be light in your darkness. And so make me a part of your life that you can see the way forward. And then last week we looked at, I am the gate and the good shepherd for the sheep. I am the one who keeps you safe, and I'm the one who knows your name. I'm the one who calls you and knows you. And we as the sheep, we need to listen and know the voice of the shepherd, so that when the shepherd calls us, we know who's calling us. We know which voices to follow and which voices to reject. And so we continue the story tonight, looking at the I ams of Jesus. So at this time, we're going to be in John chapter 11. It's an important story in the life of Jesus. It's that story of Lazarus. If you haven't heard it before, hear it again. If you've heard it before, hear it with new ears tonight. I'm going to set the stage here. John sets the stage for us in chapter 11 with the story of Lazarus. Hear God's word as we begin to dive into the story to understand who Jesus is. Now, a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, Lord, the one you love is sick. And when he heard this, Jesus said, this sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed 2 more days and then said to his disciples, let us go back to Judea. But Rabbi, they said, a short while ago the Jews were trying to stone you, And you want to go back? Jesus answered, are there not 12 hours of daylight? Anyone who walks in the daytime will not stumble, for they see this world's light. It is when a person walks at night that they stumble, for they have no light. And after he had said this, he went on to tell them, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I'm going there to wake him up. And his disciples replied, Lord, if he's asleep, he's going to get better. Jesus had been speaking of his death, but his disciples thought they meant natural sleep. So then he told them plainly, Lazarus is dead, and for your sake I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe. Let us go to him. All right. And so there's the story. Lazarus is a dear friend of Jesus. It's a family that he's known. He's stayed with at different times. We see him bumping into these folks at various times in the Gospels. And now Lazarus is sick and he's dying. And we're going to learn something about who Jesus is through the event of Lazarus' death. All right. So on we go. Verse 17 continues, on his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now, this is hugely important, hugely important. In the Middle East at this time, in ancient Near East, during these days of Jesus' time on the earth, there was a very wide-held understanding that when a person died, the spirit hovered around the body for up to 3 days. All right? 3 days, the spirit hovered around the body. And anytime during those 3 days, it was possible that the spirit could go back into the body and the body be reanimated. I don't know if this grew out of things that they ran into with people going into comas or what, but for some reason, during this period, for 3 days, it was presumed that it was possible, not that it happened, it was presumed that it was possible for the spirit to re-enter the body and reanimate the body. And Jesus, very intentionally, stays away. He's gone for 4 days. So the body has been there for 4 days, in the tomb for 4 days. And so any hope of that reanimation of the spirit going back to the body. Now, mind you, this is not biblical stuff. This was just sort of presumed stuff, all right? Things that people just sort of held to, like we hold to this idea, if you don't wear a jacket in cold weather, you're going to catch a cold. Well, I mean, jackets may or may not have anything to do with colds. It's all about a virus that goes up into our nose, those rhinoviruses that make us sick. But we still say that, right? Oh, put a jacket on, you'll catch cold. Well, keep your hands away from your face or you'll catch cold is probably much closer to the truth. And so there was this idea that if the body was, anytime during those 3 days after a person had supposedly died, that spirit could come back. And so Lazarus has been in the tomb for 4 days when Jesus comes back. And listen to the interchange. Now Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem. And many Jews had come to Mary and Martha to comfort them in the loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him. Mary stayed home. Now, this is the way we usually read this verse. Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask. Now, I somehow sense that if Martha's brother had died, and if Martha really believes that if Jesus had been there, he wouldn't have died, this verse would have been, these words would have been said something more like this. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now, God will give you whatever you ask. You see, the scriptures that are written for us, they don't have any symbols or emojis like we get now that tell us how to read things. Not even the periods or question marks are there. We have to presume if it's a statement or a question. Sometimes the sense is clear, but sometimes it's not. And certainly the pain and agony of Martha doesn't come through with just the words written on the page. We have to imagine how Martha would have felt when her beloved brother dies. And she knows that Jesus could have saved him. And he wasn't there. They had sent word and Jesus stayed 2 more days. The frustration that Martha had, we can only imagine. Besides the pain and the anger, Another thing that we don't realize is that this is a huge, huge event in the life of these two women. So we've got Martha, Mary, and Lazarus who live in this house, who live there. And the man of the house has died. This now means that not only has Martha and Mary lost their brother, but they could very well lose everything. Everything, because in Middle Eastern culture at this time, women were not property owners. They could not own property. And so when Lazarus died, the nearest male relative inherited everything that he owned. And I don't know if it was a generous uncle or who knows, cousin, or if it was a mean-spirited person who may have come along and said, get out, ladies, you're done. Out of the house, find somewhere else to go. These ladies are beside themselves with grief and with fear. What is going to happen to their lives? Where will they go? What will they do? What's going to happen? How long will we be able to live here? What will we have to do in order to live and to survive? And so we need to really hear these words with all of the grief and the anguish and the fear that Martha has at this moment. Her world has been turned upside down. For us today, it's enough to lose a sibling, someone that we love, someone in our family, and it breaks our heart to have to say goodbye and let someone go. But to do that with the fear that not only have you lost a loved one, but you're losing everything you have. Oh my gosh, can we even imagine? Lord, if you had only been here, my brother would not have died. If you had only been here, my future would be certain. If you'd only been here, I would know that I would have a house to live in. If you had only been here, I would not have lost this companion of my life. If you had only been here, I would not have to be wondering how I'm going to make ends meet next month. If you had only been here. But you might be able to do something. You might be able to change things. I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask. Those words of hope. Please, Jesus, do something. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha answered, I know he will rise at the resurrection, at that last day. And Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. There it is, folks. I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die. Yet whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this? Yes, Lord, I believe you're the Messiah, the Son of God who is to come into the world. She doesn't believe it. She doesn't believe it. She doesn't believe it. Do you believe that I'm the resurrection and the life and that whoever believes in me was never going to die? Yes, Lord, I believe that you're the Messiah. That is not the question Jesus asked. And how often do we claim to believe something? Jesus says, will you give yourself to me? Yes, Lord, I will go to church on Sundays. Wait a minute. That's not what Jesus is asking us. Will you trust me and give yourself to me? Jesus says, yes, Lord, I will send in a check once a month. Wait, that's not what Jesus is asking. Will you give yourself to me? Jesus says. Will you trust that I will give you that life, that I will be light, that I will be sustenance? Yes, Lord, I'll make sure that my children go to vacation Bible school. We often answer a question that God's not even asking us. Oh, it's sort of similar and it may be somewhat related, but too often we're just like Martha. Hey, will you trust me? Will you follow me? I'm going to call you to go, and I want you to go and speak to these people who nobody else on your block is going to go talk to. No one else in your community is going to go and greet them and welcome them because they're different or they're uncertain about these folks. Will you go do this? Oh, Lord, I'm going to give money to missions every Sunday, I promise you. That's not the question. That is not what Jesus is asking of us. And too often Jesus asks us to trust him, to give ourselves to him, to believe what he says, and we'll believe something and we'll trust something, but we don't answer the question that Jesus is asking of us. We don't respond to what God is calling us to, and that is what this entire study is about. Will we know Jesus well enough to entrust our lives to him? Jesus says, I am the resurrection and the life. The resurrection is the one that brings new life, that brings things back to life. And when Jesus says, I'm the resurrection and the life, it's not just that biological life, it is a vitality. It's again that word that we bumped into a few weeks ago, that word, zoe. It's that vitality and fullness of life. I am the resurrection and the life. Now, some of us will say, well, that's really nice. That's interesting. How does this apply to me? How does this make any sense for me? I mean, my father passed away, and Jesus didn't bring him back to life right there. And so that I know was so dear to me, and they passed away, and I prayed, God, bring them back to life, be the resurrection, and they didn't come back to life right there. So how are we supposed to take this passage and to take these words of Jesus, I am the resurrection, and the zoe, that life that's full of vitality, and how do we apply it to our own world and our own lives? Death does not apply only to our physical bodies. How many of us have had dreams and hopes and aspirations that have been killed? Sometimes by people around us, sometimes by our own lack of attention. We've let the dreams that God has given us simply die. How many of us have experienced that kind of death of hopes and wishes and plans and all of these things, and they're just gone because someone killed them or because we didn't feed those dreams? Jesus comes to us today and says, I am the resurrection and the life. What dreams have you had that have died? What is it that has been a part of your life that you've let go? And it seems like that part of you and that piece of you and that dream you've had, gone forever. I recall when my wife and I were in mission service overseas. We were in Venezuela and then later in Mexico. And we had to raise our own funds. We were working with the Mission Society at the time, an organization based in Atlanta. TMS Global today is their name. And we had to go to churches and to small groups, and we had to go to people and invite them to join us, to partner with us financially, so that we could make this move and go into another country to live and to serve. And so I recall vividly, one of the small groups that we went to, there was this very sweet elderly woman there who said, when I was young, I heard God call me into missions. God called me to go and serve God's people in another place. And I was scared, and I put it off, and I got married, and I had children, and I raised my children, and I've helped raise my grandchildren, and I've never had a chance to respond and to go. I've never had a chance to live that dream. But now, through you and your family, I'm going to live my dream. I want you to go, and I'm going to do what I can to make sure that you can go and serve. And so I'm going to give what I can, and I'm going to pray for you all every day. There was a moment of resurrection for that woman. Jesus came into that moment when our family and her dreams came together at the right place at the right moment. And no, she never physically left the country. She never got to make that trip to another land. But she partnered and she extended her dream through others, through us, to touch lives in other places. This is one of the ways that Jesus can come in and resurrect and bring to life something that was seemingly dead. A number of people get to the end of their working years, they hit retirement, and some folks just sit in the recliner and they watch TV, and that's the end of their life of contribution to the world is over. But then there are those other people who get to that point and often moved by God's Spirit, they realize I've got time now to do stuff. I've got time now to reach out. Here in our own congregation, we have men and women that are retired, but man, they're here all the time helping with our food program as we feed over 700 families in the colonias. Colonias are these areas, most of them south of our city, closer to the river, where these groups of people live, and sometimes they don't have electricity, they don't have running water, they don't have, a lot of the things that we take for granted, but they're there and they have families and children and dreams just like you and I do. And so we have folks that come in and help by packing food and reaching out. We have a ramp project we're actually working on right now in our church, building ramps for people who can't get in and out of their houses. They don't have that ability. They've been become disabled. They're in wheelchairs or they're not able to get up and down stairs. And so we have many times retired folks who stand up and say, you know what, I can do this. And dreams they had when they were younger of reaching out and doing ministry, they now have time and the means to be able to do that. Jesus is the one who resurrects those broken dreams, those dead desires that are within us, and gives us new life. Jesus can come into a relationship that seems like it is dead or dying. And Jesus is the one that can give new life to a couple that seems to be moving so far apart. I've seen it in among peers of my own. A couple meet, they fall in love, their lives are passionate, and the fire is burning, and they put their lives together, and they build a home, and they have children, and then they start focusing on their children, and they forget to focus on each other. And slowly but surely, their lives just tend to go like this, and they're working, and they're caring for the children, and then the children grow up, and the children leave off for college, and suddenly a couple that was just like this finds themselves so far apart because they haven't fed and nourished and taken care of their relationship. Jesus comes to that relationship and says, I am the resurrection and the life. And how many times I've seen couples who begin to look at Jesus, and as they begin to look at Jesus together and they come to worship together and they realize that their lives are not over, and they come back together, and God is able to give new life and vitality to those relationships. Friendships that we think are dead are sometimes resurrected. And social media, one of the good things of social media is that it has brought us back together many times with people. When I was teaching for many, many years, I would tell the story of my friend P.T. Thomas. He was from India, from Kerala. He and I met in college. His father was, I believe, the physics professor there or business professor. And the last I heard of PT is he left and went and did something with IBM somewhere in Atlanta, and we lost touch. But I would tell the story of PT because he was from a traditional Indian family. And the first summer that we knew each other, he was planning to go back to India to meet the girl that his family had selected for him to marry. I know that's crazy for us to even imagine, and it blew my mind. I was like, what do you mean? You're crazy. He says, well, have you seen my parents? Do they seem like they love each other? And I had seen his parents, and they were just a very normal family and couple. They seemed they cared for each other. They talked, they laughed together. And I said, yeah. He says, well, my parents met the same way. And I trust my parents. They're going to find someone that they really want the best person for their son. And so I trust my parents to pick someone. Anyway, I would tell my students that story. Each year we would do a set of readings about relationships. And of course my students were like, what? No way. I'm only going to marry for love. This is crazy. And I lost track of PT. I lost track of my friend. And then over Christmas this year, this past Christmas, 2020, I opened my email and there's an email from P.T. Thomas. John, is that you? And I was like, oh my gosh, hadn't heard from him in 30 years. And a relationship that I figured was just gone and done and over with is suddenly coming back together, because that's what Jesus does. That's what God wants to do in our lives, is to give new life to those good things within us, those dreams and relationships and friendships and hopes and passions. Jesus comes to us and says, I am the resurrection and the life. So think for just a minute. What is a dream that was a good dream in your life that you maybe thought was dead? What was a good relationship, a friendship that seems to, just have passed on and is over? What is a hope that you had for yourself and your family when you were just starting out and it never came to be? Is there dying embers in your own relationship with your spouse, the person you love? Jesus steps into our lives and he says to us, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will never die. Not that ultimate death, not that final death. No, there's always a place for new life when we trust in Jesus. Later in this passage, Jesus is with Mary. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. That's Mary. Martha said it too. When Jesus saw her weeping and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and trouble. Where have you laid him? He asked. Come and see, Lord, they replied. Then Jesus wept. Jesus doesn't just stand back and view death as, oh, it's nothing, it'll come back to life. He doesn't see our crushed hopes and dreams and our broken relationships and say, well, it'll have new life. He weeps with us. This is another thing that we can trust about Jesus, is that he is with us in all that we experience. And that's why Paul can write those words, weep with those who weep and mourn with those who mourn and laugh with those who laugh. Then the Jews said, see how he loved him? Verse 38, Jesus was deeply moved. He came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone across the entrance. Take the stone away. But Lord, said Martha, by this time there's an odor. He's been there 4 days. Then Jesus said, did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? So they took the stone away, and Jesus looked up and said, Father, thank you that you have always heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me. And when he had said this, Jesus called out in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. And the dead man came out, his hands and feet with strips of linen, his cloth around his face. And Jesus said to them, take off his grave clothes and let him go. Jesus comes to our lives, and he looks at those good things in our lives that have been either crushed by others or that we've allowed to die, and Jesus says, come back to life. And so I encourage you to join me in trusting Jesus to give new life to our hopes, our dreams, our friendships, our relationships, our families, wherever it is that you need resurrection. Just trust. Walk with Jesus and listen to Jesus. And as we grow closer to Jesus, we grow closer to the one who is the resurrection and the life. And we will see if Jesus will not also bring new life to us. Jesus has said, I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. I am the gate and the good shepherd, and I am the resurrection and the life. May we entrust our lives to him as we know who Jesus is for us. Thank you for being with us. I appreciate the time you've given as we continue to search God's Word. May the Lord bless you and keep you this week. May he set his countenance upon you, give you peace. May he fill you with his life and his light and all that he brings to you and to us. Until we're together again next week, God bless. Bye-bye.